What is up, down, and sideways, Earthlings? Welcome to another episode of League Unlock. My name is Eric, and I am honored and humbled to be here with you guys watching as we have a little bit of a special episode where we're going to look back at all MVP winners across the history of the award within the LCS, and there are some very clear themes that you could monitor throughout this award, whether it's a certain individual capturing many of them, imports being the vast majority of recipients of the award, or top laners being the only role that have never received an MVP award within North America. And the award started being handed out in 2014 spring, so 2013, the inaugural LCS season. That whole year, there was no MVP award given. If there was in the summer split, it absolutely would have gone to Meteos for Cloud9, but alas for him, he does not get the honors. So the first MVP award went to BJERGSEN, of course, in his first ever split in 2014 spring. And we are going to go through these chronologically for the most part, but for the man in the mid lane for Team Solo Mid, and the only person who has multiple MVPs, he has 4 of them, we're just going to kind of look at all 4 of his and the seasons that he had. 2014 spring and 2015 spring were his first 2, and they were the most impressive splits. The numbers were absolutely disgusting. 2014 spring was his first time in the LCS. He had played in EU with Copenhagen Wolves, but as a rookie in North America, he completely obliterated the competition. 33 solo kills for a mid laner. The next highest was 17. He almost doubled them up in that regard, almost 20 CS at 15 minutes he was up. This entire season, looking back on it, it looks like you put a professional mid laner from 2018 to play in the 2014 era, which you know how much the skill set has evolved, not just of pro players, but even solo queue players in 4 years. BJERGSEN was absolutely playing at another level, and he made pretty much every other mid laner and every other player in the LCS look absolutely silly in most of those matchups. They would get swept 3-0 in the finals of 2014 spring, but that was more of TSM as a team against Cloud9. 2015, it was more of the same for BJERGSEN. This is when assassins were meta. This is when BJERGSEN Zed was absolutely disgusting. His Ahri was at another level in spring. He was 4-0 on that champion with the KDA north of 18. And again, it was solo kills coming left, right, and center for him. Everybody misses that meta where assassins were there in the meta, in the forefront, and played the majority of the games. It wasn't control mages, it wasn't these support mages and just kind of there to set your team up. It was, I'm gonna get solo kills and I'm gonna carry the team by getting fed myself and going 7-0 on these picks. The champion meta is not like that, and just the overall gameplay isn't like that anymore. The game has developed and evolved so much over the past 4 or 5 years, but that peak play from BJERGSEN is probably something you'll never see again, because he was that much just more advanced in terms of skills to the rest of the competition in North America, and the meta allowed for him to play those type of characters where he could completely dominate. But he still got 2 more MVP awards, even when the meta started to change. It was 2016 summer and 2017 summer. So the first era of MVPs, it was the spring splits, and then it was the summer splits later on, and the numbers were not quite as ludicrous as they were in the first couple of years. It was more, he didn't make any mistakes during these years, or very limited mistakes, so the KDA numbers were up. Perhaps, the damage numbers not quite at the same level. He was still dominant in the laning phase, but a lot of this, the solo kills and damage not quite being there, is you're not playing Zed as much. You're not playing LeBlanc as much. He definitely took a more supportive role and was playing more characters, more champions like Zillion, things in the mid lane, Lissandra, where you're not going to be solo killing people across the entire map. And as I said before, that is not what the meta called for, but he was still always in the conversation, usually at the forefront for best mid laner in North America. And let's just, again, take a moment. 4 MVPs this guy has. Nobody else even has multiple. No one has even 2. And he's clearly been domestically the best player, although DOUBLELIFT is definitely giving him a run for his money in the last few years. But the mechanics, not even close to a drop-off, and up until 2017, right at the end of 2017 summer, it was still TSM's region. They were still dominating. They wouldn't win every single split, but this is the era where they were making every single LCS final that ever existed. That came to a crashing close in 2018. And the summer split in particular, by the way, one of these years was when best of threes was a thing in the LCS, and he was the first MVP during a best of three era. But 2017 summer was when the very odd year, and by the way, he went toe-to-toe with Doublelift for a couple of these MVP awards. It was when TSM was completely smashing, and you could have probably given it either way. But in 2017 summer, it was very weird because he won MVP, but he wasn't even on the first team All-Pro for mid laners. That went to Jensen, and if you were looking at the numbers, Jensen was better than him in almost every major category for mid laners, but you remember how dominant TSM was in the summer split. You knew an MVP was going to be going to somebody on that roster. Doublelift was the first team All-Pro AD carry. Maybe it should have gone to him. You could definitely argue that some of these MVPs that BJERGSEN got in 2016 or 2017 could have gone to Hauntzer or Doublelift during that stretch because they were both playing out of their minds as well. But you couldn't really be too upset with BJERGSEN capturing them. He was still incredibly consistent, and the key was he, like I said before, made almost zero mistakes. He was never getting caught out. His first blood victim rate was always 2%, or at the very least sub 5%. Just incredibly consistent. And while the playstyle that he has had has been safer, he's not necessarily roaming as much, he's more lane focused. Maybe that's not how the game is played these days, with G2 completely throwing the meta up in the air. But back then, BJERGSEN was still the best mid laner in North America, and that is why he has 4 MVPs to his name. Coming up after the break, we get back on track chronologically, and this is when the imports started coming in and stealing all that MVP hardware. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to League Unlock as we are looking through the history books of LCS MVP winners. We were going to do it fully chronologically, but figured it'd be easier to just get BJERGSEN out of the way since the man has 4 of them. But if you leave after him, when he got it in spring, in 2014 summer, the next recipient, and the reason that there are import rules in North America, LMQ came over, and COREJJ captured the MVP award for 2014 summer. And LMQ, if you're not familiar with the story, they were a 6th place team in the LPL. They came, brought the entire squad over to North America. They obliterated the challenger scene, got promoted to the LCS, and ended up qualifying for the World Championship. That's right, LMQ, 5 Chinese players represented North America at Worlds. If that isn't NA pride, I don't know what is. But COREJJ, he was an absolute menace in the mid lane. He was dominant in the laning phase. This was the same era where BJERGSEN was solo killing people every which way, and COREJJ loved the Yasuo where you can get some solo kills, and he was fantastic on that pick. He got a pentakill in the playoffs against TSM, and LMQ, they brought over the LPL play style to North America. It was fighting, fighting, fighting non-stop, and I mean, when you have assassins, when you have these team fighting or team skirmishing team comps, there's going to be a lot of kills, and you saw that, at least by North American standards, that LMQ definitely shaped the meta a little bit. And even though it ended up bringing the import rule in, they definitely improved North America as a whole, because even the top teams, the TSMs and Cloud9s of the world, had to step up to be able to compete with LMQ and COREJJ. And you remember after that, he went to Impulse, and then he eventually got banned for ELO boosting. So the MVP is kind of the summit or highlight of COREJJ's career. A couple years or a couple splits after COREJJ, you had Rush, your boy, the kind boy, on Team Impulse. And Team Impulse was what LMQ rebranded to for 2015. And it just continued the theme of these imported players coming in to key positions. And Team Impulse, they were not favorites to do anything in the playoffs, but they were at the top half, the top 4 for teams in the LCS, and a lot of that was because of Rush. He was absolutely insane. A 22.0 kill percentage as a jungler is pretty darn disgusting. He's a Lee Sin god. This is when Nidalee was disgusting as well, and you talked about BJERGSEN being a few years ahead of other people mechanically. Well, Rush absolutely was, especially on Lee Sin. Nobody in North America could play Lee Sin even close to the level that he did in 2015. This was also the era where you had Nidalee as a disgusting jungler, where her poke was just otherworldly and disgusting, the AP Nidalee builds, and he was pretty good at that. He was 1 kill away from getting a penta, 1 auto attack away, really. But he was clearly the best jungler in North America, and Team Impulse was by no means the best team in the league, but Rush was must-see action whenever he hit the Rift, and was the main reason why Team Impulse was actually interesting to watch. They also had Impact in the top lane, but Rush was the most exciting player throughout the entire summer split in 2015, so well deserving of that MVP award. We jump now to 2016 spring, where another imported jungler comes over. This time it is the Korean player who played in EU, REIGNOVER from FNATIC, joining Immortals. He teamed up with his pal Huni over from that squad. You remember how dominant they were in the regular season. They had some of the best win percentages, 16-2, followed 17-1, followed by 16-2, close to almost back-to-back perfect splits were Huni and REIGNOVER. And I mean, that first blood percentage is absolutely disgusting. 61%. He played every single game for them. He was almost 800 XP up at 15, north of 8 KDA. He was absolutely the best jungler in North America for the spring split. He was first team All-Pro. 4 out of the 5 members of Immortals were first team All-Pro. It was just BJERGSEN in the mid lane who took it from the notorious POB, but you could have even maybe given this to Huni because he was so dominant as well in the spring split, but REIGNOVER was just incredibly consistent. His objective control, his smites were always on point. He almost never got a Baron stolen from him. The Olaf, the Rek'Sai, he wasn't necessarily playing these I'm going to get all of the kills and completely carry the game like we saw out of Rush for Impulse. We know that he was more of a supportive jungler. That was the role that he filled with FNATIC, and he filled it as well with Immortals in this split. But he did take on a little bit more of a carry role. There was a lot of talent and a lot of carry potential on this Immortals roster with Wild Turtle and Huni, and even Polebelter was more of a carry on this roster. But REIGNOVER absolutely smurfed on the entire LCS, and he followed up again with Summer, where he played super well, but it was playoffs where Immortals could not get it done, but he still got that MVP hardware. And then 2017 spring, because 2016 summer was another MVP for BJERGSEN. So the spring split in 2017 probably still to this day is the biggest surprise MVP winner. It is Arrow on Phoenix 1. And if you had predicted anybody from Phoenix 1 getting an MVP award, you would have been absolutely insane to think that. But the kill percentage, the damage numbers, the KDA, all top of his class for Arrow when he helped guide Phoenix 1 to an unlikely third place finish in the spring split. Not many people would have predicted that. And this is kind of his first year over in the LCS. And back in the day, I mean, 2017 is hardly back in the day, but a lot of these Korean players that came over, the first split that you saw them, they were actually completely annihilating the competition. And Arrow, as is true throughout the majority of his career, he was never really a lane-first type of AD carry. He was very much a, let me get 2 or 3 items and have an even team fight, and I will carry it for the squad. And that was absolutely the play style that Phoenix 1 had throughout the spring split, and Arrow was the key cog in that for them. He loved those long-range, the Ezreals, the Varus, the Jhin, where he could pick you off from across the map. So you know he's going to love playing Aphelios champions like that. And it's, who would have thunk that Arrow would stay in North America for 3+ years after this run with Phoenix 1. He never really matched the height of this, and that's a theme with almost all of these imports that we talked about. Zhao, Rush, REIGNOVER. REIGNOVER had another split where he was great, but the drop-off was very quick for all of these imported players capturing an MVP award. They had that absolute peak performance in one split and then went down a large slide where the performance dipped quite a bit, but at least they got their MVP awards. Coming up after the break, the final 4 MVPs, and it is the ghosts of TSM after they leave the squad finally getting their own MVPs. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and germs, welcome back to League Unlock as we continue looking through the historical MVP winners across the history of the LCS, and we're going to 2018 now, where we went through the era where imports were capturing the award almost every single year, especially because BJERGSEN is technically an import. But 2018 spring was the first time you had a North American-born player win the MVP award in North America. Pretty crazy. 5 years into the split, or into the league, is when that finally happened. It was APHROMOO on 100 Thieves in their first ever split. Helped guide them to finish in that #1 spot in the regular season with a 12-6 record, and the numbers don't fully do it justice how important he was to this squad. Just the leadership, everything he did off the rift, which is hard to quantify, and you can question whether or not that deserves to be included when you're considering somebody for an MVP award, but he really helped CODY Sun come into his own. You saw the potential and growth out of him in 2017, and then the CODY Sun insect happens at Worlds. But CODY in spring was absolutely incredible, and you could almost make an argument for him getting MVP over APHROMOO, but you know the theme. When you're the best team in the regular season, somebody has got to capture that award. Someday, CODY Sun, APHROMOO all had claims, probably, but the playmaking that came out of Afro, whether it was the Blitzcrank or the Thresh or a Braum, and protecting CODY Sun, he played both playstyles, the engage and kind of backline peeling supports. We know he's been able to play both throughout the entirety of his career. And since he's played with Doublelift, it's been developing AD carries after developing different young players to do that. And Afro, the first support and the first North American-born player to capture that award in 2018 spring. And in the summer split following in 2018, it was his former Rush Hour buddy, Doublelift, who finally, and I do mean finally, got an MVP award. There is probably 3 or 4 splits off the top of my head where you could have him in the conversation. Back to his CLG days in 2014, a couple of BJERGSENs, you could probably argue TSM or Doublelift maybe had the edge for him over it in TSM. This probably wasn't even his most dominant split, but just with how the rest of the competition worked out, it was how he got his MVP award. And this is pre-COREJJ. He was still with Olay in the bottom lane. They were still very much the best bot lane in North America, no doubt about that. And he was the best AD carry, probably the best player in the league, and that's why he got MVP. It's just, he's had so many incredible splits, and he's had more impressive performances in years prior to this one, but just happy that he finally did get an MVP award. And even in his interviews, you heard him talk about it back then, kind of saying, you know, I feel like I maybe should have had a few already, but, you know, he did the usual, thank his teammates, and he still is not going to touch the 4 MVPs that BJERGSEN's going to have, but he's already surpassed him in LCS titles. So whether you want an MVP award or you want LCS titles, well, you probably want the titles, and Doublelift has that edge. And we go the split right after that, 2019 spring. It's his buddy, his other buddy, COREJJ, who captures it as the second support ever in North America. So back-to-back splits, you had either member of a Team Liquid bot lane capturing MVPs. This was the first split that COREJJ came over to North America, and the numbers for Afro weren't necessarily there. For COREJJ, they were absolutely there. If you look at those 3 categories, the XPD at 15, they were the most dominant laning duo in the entire LCS. The kill participation, he roamed across the map. Well, they were the most dominant in-lane duo to be part of most of their kills. And the vision score, him and xSmithy also combined to have just incredible control around the entire map. So every important category that you expect a support to excel at, most players aren't good at all three. They have a specialty. They're either really good at lane or they're good at roaming and getting other lanes rolling. COREJJ did it all on multiple champions. His Tom Kench ultis across the entire map when nobody was expecting them to all of a sudden pop in and change a 1v1 or 1v2 into a 3v1 scenario and spoon feed some kills onto the carries. And he absolutely lived up to the hype. He was the immediate upgrade that Team Liquid were looking for to compete internationally, and well, immediately on their first run at MSI with him, they obviously took down IG to get to the finals where they got absolutely smacked by G2, but COREJJ lived up to the hype and continued to be while the drop-off that we've seen out of other MVPs, even Afro, after 2018 spring, there was a significant decline. DOUBLELIFT and COREJJ continue to be the best bot lane in North America and have been even after they captured their MVP awards. So you had DOUBLELIFT, formerly of TSM. He gets booted. He wins an MVP award. A couple of splits later, your boy SVENSKEREN, after his first year with Cloud9, 2019, in summer, he comes in and all of a sudden has maybe definitely one of his, maybe his best split overall in North America to capture his own MVP, to be the second ex-TSM member to win the award. And the deaths were still high for SVENSKEREN in this split, but he was constantly getting team fights involved for Cloud9. He was not afraid to die for his squad. I love referencing it. It's called tactical inting. Hillisang has talked about it on FNATIC. You need a player who's not afraid to die for the squad. SVENSKEREN absolutely did that. He completely controlled the early game for Cloud9. You saw resurgent and one of the probably the best season we've seen out of Nisqy as a professional player, and that was because of the duo that he had with SVENSKEREN. He completely enabled his solo laners to play incredibly aggressively. At times he did ignore the bottom lane, which made Sneaky and Zazo look even worse than they were, but it paid off for Cloud9. They knew that Licorice and Nisqy were going to be their best win conditions, and SVENSKEREN absolutely played to both side lanes for Cloud9, and it just proves that when you are free of the criticism and shackles that are accustomed with being the jungler for Team Solo Mid, then you can truly spread your wings and fly, those Red Bull wings that come with Cloud9. And SVENSKEREN and DOUBLELIFT both have excelled in their time off of TSM, and they did excel on that squad. Let's not forget how dominant Team Solo Mid was with that absolutely star-studded roster. But the history of the MVP and the LCS is fascinating. To see that era of imports winning and then some actual NA talent capturing it, with really just APHROMOO and DOUBLELIFT, then SVENSKEREN and COREJJ getting it. Nobody is ever going to get close to the 4 MVPs that BJERGSEN had. And that's all the time today for League Unlocked. My name is Eric. Thank you guys for hanging out. We'll catch you on the flippity flop.